From the Channel Seed Studios, welcome to The Hook. A look behind the lines with Mike Palm and Ken Miller. Powered by Circa Sports Iowa. Sports betting the way it should be. This is Iowa Everywhere.
Channel Seed. Seedsmanship at work.
And hello again, everyone, and welcome to The Hook here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. My name is Ken Miller. Talk sports on Des Moines Sports Station, 106.3 KXNO. It's Trent Condon every Monday through Friday from 11 to 1. My partner is Mike Palm, Vice President of Operations at Circa Sports, of course, based in Las Vegas. Mike, a busy week, NFL draft week, 2 days away as we sit here and tape this. We'll talk NHL, a little NBA, Major League Baseball. The A's may not be in the location we first thought they were going to be, as apparently there's another suitor that potentially wants to build a ballpark on a different portion of the Strip. This would be on the north side of the Strip, so we'll pick your brain on that. But how are you, first of all? What kind of week has it been for you?
Well, I just would like to get through the draft. That's step one. We're winding up these first round series in the hockey and the NBA, so that's good. And then we've got the Maddox event this weekend, the poker tournament on Sunday night, and then we are hosting the AGA cocktail party, the American Gaming Association, the board of directors. We meet our spring meeting in Las Vegas on Tuesday, and we're hosting a cocktail party and the dinner at Barry's here at Circa on Monday night. So it's a busy next 5 days.
Well, I'll say that is a busy time. Well, get through that and get through the draft, and we're at the Derby week, couple of days to pick up your racing form and study your your PPs, past performances. Get ready for that. Let's get into the draft, because Mike, I'm starting to form the opinion that if the betting on the draft went away, I don't think that we would miss it. And the reason I say this, I mean, this morning is a perfect example. Last night, people put their head on their pillows if they're following this. Will Levis was, depending on what operator you deal with, was 45, was 50 to 1. And apparently on Reddit, of all places, which I never go to, I had to ask Trent what it is. I guess it's a colony or community of message boards. Someone posted that they're good friends with Will Levis, and Levis let it slide that Carolina intends to draft him number 1. Overnight, the price dropped from 45 to 1 down to 4 to 1, from 50 to 1 to 4.5 to 1. Did you guys see a significant move on Levis from where he was to where he was when you got up this morning?
I think we had him. We don't offer number 1. We offer number 2.
We
offer the overall number 2. And I think he was just around 18 to 1 about 36 hours ago. And now he's plus 130. He's the favorite to go second in our pool. So, I mean, we opened this up on Friday. We didn't even really want to open it up until Monday. It's just, listen, we sat here last year when the draft was in Las Vegas, and we had these players here telling us things that were absolutely not true. I'm not saying they were lying, but we had a player say, this team said they're drafting me number 2. And I mean, guys went out and bet money all around town. Didn't happen. I mean, we had 3 examples of that where a player said, I'm getting drafted by this team. It's a sure thing. Didn't happen in any case.
I think it's I think that the state should take a long look at this, Mike. I mean, this was a perfect example. Yours is a perfect example. There's too much info bad and word. You bet on a game, you find out that the left tackle might be hurt. You're going to plug in a new left tackle, right? It's a game. You still got to play the 60 minutes or the 3 periods or the 48 minutes if it's the NBA, ... This is different. Look, I'm grateful that we can bet on MVPs. I'm grateful we can bet on the Cy Young, those type of things. I think that there's a spot for those. But the NFL draft is it's just different. How much business do you do? Is it significant? Would you miss it?
We take $1,000 max bet. So, we write 6 figures into it, but real hard to make a winner. And it's just, I'd much rather us be allowed to bet on presidential elections than bet on drafts.
Yeah. Right.
They'd encourage people to vote.
You know what? I never thought of that. Is that coming?
I don't know. I don't know why not. You know what I mean? I know you're going to say it's entertainment and it's outside the realm, but I mean, there's states that allow the Oscar wagering. So what would be different?
Right. You can bet on the American presidential race in the UK,
Yep.
but in the United States, you can't bet on the race. Interesting. Uh, so the draft itself, how many props did you put up, and what are some of the ones that you've seen has had significant movement, if any?
We put up players over under position, a number of
Yep.
players, and then we did some matchups. We did the number 2 pick was the only one we did. The exact pick was number 2. And we did total number of quarterbacks, tight ends, wide receivers over undertaken in the first round. So what Levis's position, by the way, is 4.5, over under 4.5. So under is 4th or earlier. He's now minus $5 something to go under 4. I mean, this was a pick where he was like minus 180, and now he's minus 525 to go under 4.5.
Well, we know that you can't bet at Circa. Will you dabble in any of
No.
your other accounts? I
No.
never take it. I never give it a second look.
Never done it.
Yeah, I have no desire to do it. NBA's going Major League Baseball. NHL's going golf this weekend. If you can't find anything to bet, right, you're not trying very hard. Interesting. So one more on this before we move on. The reason you didn't put up a who will go first overall, because it seemed like Bryce Young was a cinch.
I don't know what there's really not a market there for that.
Yeah.
By the time we get to posting him, he's minus $4 in most spots, right? So I don't think that when it's decided there's much drama there. So how do you create any handle or any business on it? So 2 seem to be more debate now. Who was going 2? As you know, late last week, CJ Stroud's status seemed to be falling, right? For a while there, he was minus $2 when they showed Bryce Young's shoes, and they were making a big deal out of the lifts in his shoes and all that, but that turned pretty quickly. And, now it's thought the Texans may not even choose a quarterback number 2. So there's some interest around number 2.
Yeah, I'm going to die on the hill that I think quarterbacks are going 1, 2, 3, 4, but we will see. Houston has the 12th pick in the draft, so they may get a defensive player, say an Anderson, in all likelihood, and then come around to 12 again and grab the quarterback that they want. Well, let's move on from the NFL with one exception. So the NFL, the draft is over. The schedule comes out on May the 10th. How quickly after that do you think you'll have totals available? Any idea?
We really got to hit to the contest as soon as we get the schedule, because we need to see what they're doing with this flex, how that might affect Survivor with the new flex. So I would say probably within 10 to 12 days, we'll get the contest hammered out those first weeks so that we can try to get it open by Memorial Day weekend, and then put the win totals up probably early in that week after. So, that week before Memorial Day as well, probably win totals up.
You mentioned the contest. In fact, my phone was ringing this weekend. 2 of the players that I'm with both reached out to me and asked me if there's any, are we doing it again this year? Can we expand this year? So do you know, and I know that probably the rules haven't been set in stone. Last year, you could, a person could have 6 entries in Survivor. Will that remain the same this year, do you think?
That's on the table, and I think we're leaning on going up, but we haven't officially written the rules yet. But that's okay. That was one of the top subjects. And I think if we're going to raise the guarantee to what we are, we need to do that.
Gotcha. Well, that's interesting. That's a good tease right there. We're also going to play Circa Millions because, look, we loved the fact that we had 3 weeks of, banter back and forth amongst our group. But as you know, and we're not alone, we didn't make it to October last year. So Millions at least gives us a run right to the end of the year, right? If we're bad, we can try and win the booby prize.
Yeah, you have more ways to win. I also think it's harder. The 5 picks every week is harder. You do get hot for 4 or 5 weeks, you can cash too. So it's 2 different ways of playing it.
And we're going to be fully invested. And we'll be out there in August signing up, and can't wait to do that. Let's talk about let's go to Major League Baseball. We'll save the winter sports and we'll get into the playoffs. Tampa remains red hot. What did you learn, if anything, when Houston went into Atlanta and swept the Braves? Was that more of an indicator that Houston don't write us off? Just a blip on the screen for the Bravos? Well, what did that series tell you, if anything?
Well, obviously you can't write Houston off, right? I mean, it's they were 2 games under 500 and all this. You still got to beat Houston to win the American League. I was a little concerned with the Braves, not their starters necessarily, but I thought the bullpen kind of let them down. They probably should
Bullpen.
have come out of there with a split, ended up getting swept. You know what was funny last night? The Astros scored 2 in the top of the first in Tampa, and they have Urquidy pitching, right? And they were only minus 130 up 2-0 heading to the bottom of the first. I thought that was very telling how high Tampa Bay's power rating has raised so far this year. That they were a small dog, even though they were down 2 runs to a decent pitcher after a half an inning.
Interesting, because when we were doing at the end of our show, as you may know, Trent does his plays of the day, sponsored by Circa, and that was his baseball game because he thought the line was a little bit crazy because of the fact that Tampa seemed to be a little bit out of proportion because Houston's coming off a sweep of the Braves. So Tampa is caught the analytics and the line makers' eyes. They are legit.
They have to have, because I mean the number should have been, Houston should have been closer to 180 or 190 with a 2-run lead coming. I mean, they still have a decent starting pitcher, but it's almost as if the numbers built in. Tampa's going to score 5, 6, 7 runs every game.
Do you remember thinking back? You put it up prior to the season. What team will win the most? I think there was 2 days in March and then the month of April.
Yeah.
And I think you said Mitch Moss. Actually, one of your friends out in Vegas had Tampa. Do you know what Tampa was when you posted it? Because Mike, I think you can pay that bet out, right? I don't think they can be caught.
14-1.
14-1.
Yep. And he bet it just looking at their schedule of who they played. It wasn't about he thought Tampa. Right. He just said they have the weakest schedule, so why not take a shot at 14-1?
So I'm sitting here, I'm trying to do the math in my head. The only one team that could run them down, let's say that Tampa loses every game and this team wins the rest of the games for the month. Do you have any idea what team could run them down? If I would have asked you this prior to the season, you would have given me 28 teams before you got to this team. Yes.
Pittsburgh. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How are they doing this? I mean, it's a great story. Don't get me wrong. I love when
they're hitting the ball, but the pitching's been good. I mean, Rich Hill has been okay. I mean, they're going out there, and it's seemingly every time you look up, they're up 2-0, they're up 3-1. They never seem to get behind in these games. What if they won 7 in a row, and now they host the Dodgers? So this should be an interesting series.
No, it really should. I like the story. I've never been to the ballpark. I'm told that it is nice a ballpark as there is in the major leagues. Have you been?
I think I was there about 2 years after it opened. I was really impressed with Pittsburgh. Very underrated ballpark.
Joel Hanrahan, you probably remember the name, closed for the Nationals, was a 2-time All-Star. He got traded over to Pittsburgh. He said he's never seen anything like it. Been in a lot of clubhouses. He said it was just spectacular. So good for the team that they're playing the way they are. Mike, they wake up this morning, they're in first place in the Central. Not the Cardinals, not the Cubs, not the Brewers, the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Well, that gives hope to some of the others. But the Cardinals, I keep looking for them to put something together here, and they did. They can't string anything together here. They can't string 3 good starts in a row out of their staff. Mm-hmm. I'm a little concerned of the Cardinals right now. I think the Brewers will come back to earth. I still think the Cubs, this is a wide open division, maybe as wide open as any of the division in baseball.
No, I think you can make the case for 4 of the teams, right? If the Cardinals do come back and find a way. Do they need to maybe how's Marmol sleeping at night? Should he be, should he be a little bit concerned, or is he safe, do you think? Too early to make a change?
They're pretty, one of these really stable organizations, right? It takes them a long time to make a change. Mm-hmm. I know they eventually got rid of Matheny, but it wasn't that quick.
Right. Yeah.
I thought he totally overreacted about the base running play where he benched the kid. I mean, that kid is hard for him to turn it over. He's all muscle. You know what I mean? So, I mean, he doesn't have quick bursts. When you look at it to the naked eye, you think he's going to score easily because of how deep the ball got to the outfielder. But why the tongue lashing and why all the outcry? That could have been, you bench the kid. It's obvious you bench him after that and handle it in the locker room.
Right,
but
you don't take it.
I thought it was a total overreaction, and I didn't care for
it. His father, did you know his dad's story?
No.
He was Mr. Canada. You mentioned O'Neill, how big he is.
Yeah,
it comes naturally to him. His old man was a Mr. Canada in bodybuilding in the 70s.
Yeah,
big
he
dude,
is. Anyway, and his thighs are so big. He's not going to be quick from second to home.
No, no, true. I thought that was a huge overreaction. All right, let's go to
Yeah.
the American League. Let's go back to the American League. Tampa leads the way. They're the first team to get to 20 wins on the season. Um, what's their weakness?
I still think you got guys that aren't really, this openers and this and that. Can you string these pitchers together and keep, can you get these guys to go an inning and 2/3 and then bring the next guy in for 5 and stuff like that? We haven't even seen Glass now. I mean, this kid was projected to be
Nope.
a top 5 pitcher in baseball, and he hasn't got healthy. And he's what if he comes back? I mean, that adds quite a dynamic to that rotation. But the lineup's just hitting the ball. Kenny, I watch him every night, 2-out hit after 2-out hit. I watched that White Sox series down there. Every time they needed a big hit, they got a big hit, and they beat Giolito and they beat Cease. And I mean, they're just doing it against good pitchers, and their lineup is really good. They're really quality at bats, and these guys at the top of the lineup don't strike out much, and they put together these innings with the crooked numbers with these 2-out hits.
Kevin Cash, year after year after year. I thought this was the year they came back to the pack. In fact, I bet them under 89. That ticket's going to be dead by September, for crying out loud. They're flying. They are flying. Meanwhile, you mentioned the White Sox. There's too much talent, isn't it, for them to be languishing where they are? I took a flyer at 7.5 to 1 this week to win the division. I mean, 7.5 to 1 in that division. I know that Minnesota looks better. Cleveland's still Cleveland, but why can't the White Sox put it together and come back?
Well, if you just look at the names, you would think that they'd be minus $4 to win the division. And you look at the pitching. Now I have to tell you, very quietly here, Sonny Gray is having a terrific season. We're talking about Cole and Ohtani and the 2-horse race for Sonny Gray. I said 5 and die 5, and I went 7 last night against the Yankees. His ERA is 0.6. Right there with Cole and Ohtani with the incredible starts. I think Cole hurt himself on Saturday. I don't know if you were watching that game against
Toronto.
He in the 6th inning yelled over to the bench with only 1 out, and Boone came out, and then he took him out after the next bat. Something was wrong with him. He would have never come out of that game with 90 pitches, 0-0 in that spot. You remember he went 12 in a complete game the last start. So I'm still waiting to hear if he's going to make his next start, but I think something was wrong there.
I don't think he would have come out, because you know what Manoah said prior to the game. He went public and said, "Look, this is the biggest cheater in baseball." He called him out, and when the New York press asked him about that, he didn't back down. He said, "No, I said what I said, and I meant what I said." Yeah. This is a rivalry. This Blue Jays Yankees, with Vladdy saying, "I don't want to play there." Apparently that goes back to his pops. He thought he was going to sign there. They signed Sheffield. They didn't sign Vladdy Sr. I think they made a mistake. Sheffield's a nice player. Vladimir Guerrero is a hell of a player, senior and junior. So we'll see. That's a heck of a rivalry. There's another candidate for the Cy Young I think you should take a look at. I know you know who it is. Gausman. He is the ace of the Toronto Blue Jays. He's unbelievable. He's had 1 bad start.
There's no question. And the way he changed his speeds, I watched the game about the first 4 innings Sunday there in New York. I mean, he's got them so far off balance when he does throw the changeup he's I always tell you I'm not a Gausman guy, but his name is in the Cy Young race almost every year, right? So I still think Toronto is a playoff team, and I still think they're very dangerous.
Yeah, I do too. I've got a couple of exactas: Toronto over San Diego and Atlanta, San Diego and Atlanta over Toronto. Both pretty good prices if that's the exact series, World Series matchup. Let's save the NHL. Real quick on the NBA. Injury's been a big story in the NBA so far. What have you seen?
Well, this Milwaukee series is certainly interesting now. They're not even priced that, but they're only like plus 130 to come back and win the series. It to the naked eye, it should look like it's higher than that. Golden State and Sacramento's lived up to everything that we thought it would be. The Lakers seem to be
now
punking
Fox is hurt though.
Yeah. The Lakers seem to be punking this Memphis team. This is really interesting. I mean, they just completely smothered them, which is good. It's good to keep the interest in the Lakers from a betting perspective. The Sixers look great. So
sure,
we'll see. I mean, there's a few series that are going to come down to the wire that may be 6 or 7 games, but it's been pretty chalkish. outside of
It
really
has, and
two series, one on either side.
yeah, Miami, the way that they're up, Trent pointed that out today on the radio show. He said the same thing, plus 130. Why wouldn't you just roll it over, bet them, and then bet them again, then bet them again, because they got to win the rest of the games. We'll see if they're able to do that. You know who looks really good to me? Phoenix. I think Kevin Durant's starting to figure out his teammates a little bit. When Paul's going the way that he did, Booker's a star. Ayton in the middle is a good player. Phoenix might, at the end of the day, Phoenix might be the one holding the trophy. Can you go there?
I think Phoenix is just a tough matchup for the Clippers. I think Denver's awful good. I still think it's, Denver and Phoenix on the West. I guess you can't count Golden State out because they are the champs.
Yeah.
And then it becomes very interesting if the Bucks get knocked off in the East. I mean, the Boston Philadelphia will be a hell of a. I think it'll be a 6 or 7 game series. But Miami becomes very viable. Miami becomes viable again, right? I mean, they did go to the conference championship. Weren't they the 1 seed last year? I think they become very viable again here, and I wouldn't count them out from making a run off this Bucks series.
Let's go to the NHL. Let's start out east. Toronto and Tampa. I don't know how Tampa comes back from that. They're up 4-1 in the third period, deep into the third period. And to give up 3 goals, and Austin Matthews has all of a sudden come alive again to lose the game in overtime. As veteran a team as Tampa Bay is, can they overcome that, Mike? That was a gut punch.
I think Tampa's been the much better team in this series, and it hasn't really been close. But I don't think they can go into Toronto and win now. I think that'll be a really tough atmosphere. 2-2. It was a new series, best 2 out of 3. This was a collapse. They played better in the overtime in game 3 and got beat. I mean, they dominated the first 10 minutes of the overtime. So that's really tough to come out of South Florida with no victories there and go down 3-1 in a series. You dominated game 1, and you really dominated the play at home as well.
Boston going to end their series with Florida. Bergeron skated today. He says if he gets up feeling the way he will good tomorrow, he's going to be back in the lineup. If he is, I don't know how you stop them.
They're going to win it. They're going to win the Stanley Cup. The Boston's going to win the Stanley Cup, Kenny. I know I have a big this team, they just don't make mistakes. They're so buttoned up. I mean, they could lose a 7-game series, but it will take a collapse, or it'll take Allmark not playing the way he's played all year. They just don't give anything away. I just watched them play, and they just don't give up anything. So I don't know. I think every team has really shown weakness. You could argue that maybe Minnesota's been the second best team in the playoffs, and they're at 2-2. I think that they've also dominated the series with Dallas, and yet they're going to have to win a game on the road here. In Dallas, like they did in game. See, you can't give away game 2 like they did with Fleury. You just can't do that in that series. But anyhow, I feel, I know it's a 1-8 matchup, but I've been very impressed with Boston, especially in the 2 games that they played in Sunrise.
I'm with you. Let me talk about Dallas and Ottinger for a second. We had this discussion a month ago or so. We were talking about American goalies. And Ottinger, watching him do what he did the other day, and then Demko in Vancouver is not in the playoffs, and Hellebuck in Winnipeg, who has not had a good playoffs. Boy, the Americans have the goaltender. Once we get to the Olympics in 24, what a decision. How difficult is that decision going to be? Is who gets the start, for crying out loud?
Well, it's probably Ottinger.
I think at this point, I say it is. I agree with you.
Well, I would have said that before the playoffs started, too. I would have said that going into the year. Hellebuck's been a huge disappointment to me.
Terrible.
Yeah. But they've also been outplayed. They were outplayed probably in both of those games. But all these goals from in front, he gives up all these goals from right in front. Vegas doesn't try to attack him at all. Everything's from the slot. And that's where they've beaten him, and he's not made any adjustment.
And losing Morrissey and losing Ehlers and losing Scheifele, that's a 1-2-3 punch. I give Vegas full credit. And Laurent Brossoit, I mean, he's a backup, and he has outshone Connor Hellebuck. Real quick, Kraken and the Avalanche. Seattle had a really good regular season. I thought it was smoke and mirrors. I didn't give them a chance to beat the Lanch at all. The series is tied 2 apiece. Cale Makar's now suspended for Game 5. Can they get by Colorado?
I also didn't think they were good enough, but they outplayed them the first two games, and I give them credit. They give up the goal right at the end of the power play to make it 2-2 last night. And I thought they were up against it going into the third, and they win that game. They play a scoreless third and go to overtime. You got to give them a real good shot. I'm telling you who I'm really disappointed in, and not because I have a bet, but how did the Kings play that second period up 3-0 the other? How do you take two penalties? The only way Edmonton could get back in the game is if you get them on the power play, which was the greatest regular season
power play in
of all
hockey.
time, 33%.
Right.
How can you take two penalties? You cannot do it. If you stay out of the box the rest of the game, you're up 3-1.
Yep. Kings came back, took a goal lead. Was it 4-3 in the third? And Evander Kane puts one over his shoulder, and into overtime we go. I think the Kings are outplaying the Oilers so far in this series.
They are.
With the exception
They
of that
absolutely
bad
are.
Yes.
They absolutely are. But, that's...
So Boston versus who? Tough, isn't it?
I'm gonna tell you Dallas. I'm gonna tell you Dallas.
Okay.
If they're lucky enough to get by Minnesota, can go all the way. I think Minnesota is the best team in the West from what I've seen so far. That was a goofy goal. The first goal late in the second period of Game 4. It got kicked by his own player and slid between Gustafson's legs. That was an own goal. And then that opened it up for Dallas, and they stayed in the lead. But Game 5 tonight should be one of the best games of the playoffs. Everything's on the line here. This game's going to be 2-1, 3-2. I guarantee it.
What did you think of Foligno's penalties? Bad calls.
I can't stand this whistle fest in the playoffs. I mean, everything, just because people get taken out doesn't mean it's a penalty. And just because someone gets slowed down doesn't mean it's a penalty. I mean, everything's a hook. Everything's a tripping.
Yes.
Everything's, I mean, this isn't playoff hockey. I mean, you got to be able to finish checks. That's what these guys are paid to do, 82 games a year. You got to let them finish their checks. If they're not hitting them in the head, you got to let them finish their checks. And these are shoulder contacts or head on. I mean, nobody's getting drilled in the head.
I haven't seen that. Next week, we're going to have the Derby winner. You want to talk a little Derby next week?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you have your Derby horse yet? You're going to try and beat Forte?
Well, you have to. Otherwise, you don't bet the race as far as I'm concerned.
Totally agree. Yep. Can't bet the favorite. That's going to do it for this week. That's Mike Palm. My name's Ken Miller. We are part of Iowa Everywhere. You've been watching The Hook. We're grateful that you are. And we'll be back here next week with another episode. Have a great week.